How the lights dim, a spotlight illuminates the center stage. The audience falls silent as footsteps echo across the wooden floor. A pause. Then, with conviction and power, you know what the biggest lie we tell ourselves is. That we're waiting for the perfect moment. That we're waiting for someone else to believe in us first. That we're waiting for permission to become who we're meant to be. I stood backstage at Miss World 2000, 17 years old, shaking like a leaf, not because I was nervous about the competition, but because I realized something that would change my entire life. I realized that every single person in that room, every contestant, every judge, every person watching at home, they were all waiting for me to believe in myself first. And that's exactly what I want to talk to you about today. Because if there's one thing I've learned in my journey, from a small town girl in India to Miss World, to Bollywood, to Hollywood, to becoming a global entrepreneur and advocate, it's this simple truth that your grandmother probably told you, but you forgot to listen. You cannot give what you do not have. You cannot love others if you don't love yourself. You cannot lead others if you haven't learned to lead yourself. You cannot fix the world if you haven't fixed yourself first. How walks across the stage, making eye contact with the audience. Look, I'm not here to give you some fairy tale story about how everything was handed to me on a silver platter. I'm here to tell you the truth. The messy, uncomfortable, sometimes painful truth about what it really takes to transform your life. I was 12 years old when I moved to America for the first time. My parents thought it would be good for my education. What they didn't prepare me for was walking into a classroom where I was the only Indian girl, where kids would ask me if I lived in a tree, where they would make fun of my accent, where they would ask me if I had indoor plumbing back home. You know what my first instinct was? To hide, to make myself smaller, to try to fit into their idea of what I should be. I started straightening my hair. I started trying to lose my accent. I started eating lunch alone in the bathroom because I was embarrassed of the Indian food my mother packed for me. And one day, I looked at myself in the mirror and I didn't recognize the person staring back at me. I had become so focused on fixing what other people saw as wrong with me that I had lost sight of everything that was right with me. That was my first lesson in understanding that you have to fix yourself first, but not in the way you think. Ha pauses lets the words sink and see. When I say, fix yourself first, I don't mean you're broken. I don't mean you need to change everything about who you are to please other people. I mean you need to fix your relationship with yourself. You need to fix the stories you tell yourself about what you're capable of. You need to fix the lies you've been believing about your worth. Because here's what I learned that day in the bathroom, crying over a lunch my mother made with love. The problem wasn't that I was different. The problem was that I had convinced myself that different was wrong. Fast forward to Miss World, 17 years old, representing India on the world stage. Do you think I got there by trying to be like everyone else? Do you think I won by hiding who I was? Absolutely not. I got there by doing the hardest thing any of us ever have to do. I got there by falling in love with myself first. How walks to the other side of the stage. But let me tell you what falling in love with yourself actually means, because it's not what Instagram tells you it is. It's not bubble baths and positive affirmations, though those are nice too. Falling in love with yourself means looking at your flaws and saying, okay, these are mine. What am I going to do about them? It means looking at your dreams and saying, these matter. I matter. And I'm going to fight for this. It means looking at your past mistakes and saying, thank you for the lessons. Now let me use what I learned. You see, I had to learn to fix my relationship with failure before I could succeed. And this is crucial because how many of you are walking around right now paralyzed by the fear of failing? How many of you have dreams sitting on the shelf collecting dust because you're afraid you might not be good enough? When I first moved to Mumbai to pursue Bollywood, I had no connections, no film family background, no godfather in the industry. I had one thing, an unshakable belief that I belonged there. But believing you belong somewhere and proving you belong there are two very different things. My first film did okay. My second film flopped. My third film, let's just say the critics weren't kind. I remember reading one review that said I was too Western for Bollywood and too Indian for Hollywood. You know what that review did to me initially? It devastated me. I went home and cried for hours. I called my mother and told her maybe I should just come home. Maybe this dream was too big for a girl like me. And my mother said something that I want you to write down, tattoo on your forehead, whatever it takes for you to remember it. Beta, the world will always have an opinion about who you should be. Your job is not to prove them wrong. Your job is to prove yourself right. Hey, stops walking, faces the audience directly, prove yourself right. Not prove them wrong. Prove yourself right. Do you see the difference? When you're trying to prove other people wrong, you're still giving them the power. You're still making their opinion more important than your own. You're still fixing yourself according to their standards. But when you focus on proving yourself right, proving that your dreams are valid, proving that your vision matters, proving that you have something unique to offer, that's when the magic happens. So I went back to work. But this time, I didn't go back to work trying to be what the critics wanted me to be. I went back to work trying to be the most authentic version of myself possible. I studied harder. I took acting classes. I learned to dance better. I worked on my Hindi. I worked on my craft. But most importantly, I worked on my mindset. Because here's what I realized: success is not about becoming perfect. Success is about becoming consistent with who you really are. Ham walks back across the stage. Let me tell you about the day that changed everything for me in Hollywood. I had moved to Los Angeles, and I was sitting in casting rooms where they would literally tell me, "We love you, but we don't know how to cast you. You're not Indian enough for the Indian roles, and you're not American enough for the American roles." Sound familiar? It was the same story, different country, and I had a choice to make. I could try to fit myself into their boxes, or I could break the boxes. I chose to break the boxes, but breaking boxes is not easy work. Breaking boxes requires you to first break the boxes you've put yourself in. The boxes of self-doubt, the boxes of "I'm not enough," the boxes of "Who am I to dream this big?" I started saying no to roles that asked me to play stereotypes. I started saying yes to projects that excited me, even if they were unconventional. I started creating my own opportunities instead of waiting for someone to give them to me. And that's when Quantico happened. An Indian woman playing an FBI agent on American primetime television, something that had never been done before. But let me tell you what happened before Quantico. I got rejected. A lot. I got told no more times than I can count. I got told I was too this, not enough that. And every single time I had to make the choice, am I going to let this rejection define me, or am I going to let it refine me? Pauses for effect, because that's what fixing yourself first really means. It means choosing refinement over defeat. Every single time. You see, most people think that confident people don't get scared, that successful people don't have doubts, that happy people don't have bad days. That's not true. Confident people get scared all the time. They just don't let fear make their decisions for them. Successful people have doubts every single day. They just don't let doubt stop them from taking action. Happy people have bad days just like everyone else. They just don't let a bad day convince them they have a bad life. The difference is not in the presence of these challenges. The difference is in how you respond to them. How moves to center stage, and how you respond to them depends entirely on the relationship you have with yourself. Let me share something personal with you. When I first started working internationally, I developed what I now call imposter syndrome on steroids. Every room I walked into, I felt like someone was going to tap me on the shoulder and say, "Excuse me, what are you doing here? You don't belong." I would sit in meetings with Hollywood executives, and this little voice in my head would whisper, "They're going to figure out you're just a girl from India who got lucky." I would walk red carpets, and that same voice would say, "Everyone else looks more beautiful, more confident, more deserving to be here." I would give interviews, and the voice would remind me, "Don't say something stupid. Don't let your accent be too thick. Don't be too Indian, but don't try to be too American either." That voice was exhausting, and it was stealing my joy. But then I realized something that changed my entire perspective. That voice wasn't mine. That voice was a collection of every doubt, every criticism, every limitation that other people had tried to place on me throughout my life. And I had been carrying their voices in my head like they were my own thoughts. Han walks closer to the audience. How many of you are doing that right now? How many of you are walking around with other people's doubts playing on repeat in your mind? How many of you have convinced yourselves that their limitations are your reality? Here's what I did. I started having conversations with that voice. I know that sounds crazy, but stay with me. When it would say, "You don't belong here," I would respond, "Actually, I earned my place here. Let me tell you how." When it would say, "You're not beautiful enough," I would respond, "I am beautiful in my own unique way, and that's exactly what makes me valuable." When it would say, "You're going to fail," I would respond, "Maybe I will, maybe I won't. But I'm going to try anyway, because trying and failing is still better than not trying at all." I started treating that negative voice like a worried friend who means well but doesn't know what they're talking about. "Thank you for your concern, but I've got this." And slowly that voice got quieter. And my own voice, my real voice, the one that knew my worth, that believed in my dreams, that trusted my abilities, that voice got louder. Hai returns to center stage, but fixing yourself first isn't just about dealing with negative self-talk. It's also about taking responsibility for your choices. This is the part that's uncomfortable, so buckle up. For years, I blamed other people for my limitations. The casting directors who wouldn't give me a chance, the directors who typecast me, the industry that didn't know how to use me. And while it's true that there were systemic issues, while it's true that there were barriers that shouldn't have existed, focusing on those things was keeping me stuck. Because here's the truth that nobody wants to hear: you cannot control what happens to you. You can only control what you do about it. You cannot control whether people believe in you. You can only control how hard you work to prove your worth to yourself. You cannot control whether opportunities are given to you. You can only control how prepared you are when they come, and how hard you work to create your own opportunities. You cannot control other people's biases. You can only control how you respond to them. Ha walks across the stage slowly. When I started taking full responsibility for my career, everything changed. Instead of waiting for roles to come to me, I started producing my own content. Instead of complaining about the lack of diverse stories, I started telling them myself. Instead of being angry about closed doors, I started building my own doors. And that's when The Sky is Pink happened. My first film as a producer, telling a story that mattered to me, working with people who believed in the vision. That's when I started my production company, Purple Pebble Pictures, focused on regional Indian cinema and new talent. That's when I wrote my memoir, Unfinished, sharing my real story, not the sanitized version. That's when I became a UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador and started working on causes that were close to my heart. You see, when you fix yourself first, when you take ownership of your life, you stop being a victim of your circumstances and you start being the author of your story. But let me be clear about something. Taking responsibility doesn't mean blaming yourself for everything that's gone wrong. Taking responsibility means acknowledging that regardless of what has happened to you, you have the power to choose what happens next. Ham pauses, looks directly at different sections of the audience, and that power is everything. But with power comes another responsibility, the responsibility to use your healing, your growth, your success to help others. Because here's what I learned as I started succeeding. Success without purpose feels empty. Achievement without contribution feels hollow. When I won Miss World, I thought that was the destination. When I became successful in Bollywood, I thought that was enough. When I broke into Hollywood, I thought I had arrived. But each time I reached what I thought was the finish line, I felt this nagging sense that something was missing. What was missing was connection. What was missing was meaning. What was missing was the understanding that my journey wasn't just about me. Ha moves to a different position on stage. See, when you fix yourself first, when you do the work to heal your wounds and overcome your limitations and build your confidence, You don't do it just so you can have a better life, though you will. You do it so you can become the person who helps others heal their wounds, overcome their limitations, and build their confidence. You become a link in the chain of healing that extends far beyond your own life. I think about the little girl who writes to me and says, "I saw you on TV and I realized that girls who look like me can dream big too." I think about the young actress who tells me, "Your journey gave me the courage to move to a new country to pursue my dreams." I think about the entrepreneur who says, "Your story inspired me to start my own business." That's when I understood that fixing yourself first isn't selfish. It's necessary. Because you cannot give what you do not have. If you haven't done the work to believe in yourself, you cannot inspire others to believe in themselves. If you haven't learned to love yourself, you cannot teach others to love themselves. If you haven't figured out how to overcome your challenges, you cannot guide others through theirs. How walks back toward center stage. But here's the beautiful paradox. The more you give, the more you receive. The more you help others grow, the more you grow. The more you lift others up, the higher you rise. It's not a competition. It's a collaboration with life itself. And that brings me to something I want to share with you about failure, because I think we need to completely reframe our relationship with it. Most people are terrified of failure. They see it as evidence that they're not good enough, that they should give up, that their dreams are unrealistic. I see failure as information, valuable, necessary information. When Baywatch didn't perform well at the box office, I could have seen that as a sign that I didn't belong in Hollywood action movies. Instead, I saw it as information that I needed to be more selective about the projects I chose, and I needed to focus on roles that utilized my strengths better. When some of my early films in Bollywood didn't do well, I could have seen that as evidence that I wasn't cut out for acting. Instead, I saw it as information that I needed to improve my craft, understand my audience better, and choose scripts more carefully. When I faced criticism for my accent, for my skin color, for being too much in some spaces and not enough in others, I could have seen that as proof that I needed to change myself. Instead, I saw it as information that I needed to find my own lane, create my own space, tell my own stories, stops and faces the audience directly. Every failure, every rejection, every setback was not a verdict on my worth. It was data that I could use to become better, stronger, more strategic. But here's the key. You can only see failure as information instead of condemnation if you've fixed your relationship with yourself first. If you know your worth, if you trust your vision, if you believe in your ability to learn and grow, then failure becomes a teacher instead of a judge. And that's why the work of fixing yourself first is not optional. It's not a nice to have. It's the foundation that everything else is built on. So how do you actually do this work? How do you fix yourself first in practical terms? Ha begins walking again, gesturing to emphasize points. First, you have to get honest about your stories. We all have stories we tell ourselves about who we are, what we're capable of, what we deserve. Some of these stories serve us. Some of these stories sabotage us. I had a story that I wasn't smart enough for business. Do you know where that story came from? When I was young, my father would handle all the financial decisions in our house, and I internalized the message that money and business were men's work. That story served no one. It kept me from negotiating better deals, from starting my own companies, from taking control of my financial future. So I had to consciously rewrite that story. I had to educate myself about business. I had to start small, make mistakes, learn from them, and prove to myself that I was absolutely capable of making smart business decisions. Now I have multiple companies. I'm an investor. I negotiate my own deals. And I've learned that being good with business is not about gender. It's about being willing to learn and being willing to work. What stories are you telling yourself that are holding you back? That you're not creative enough? That you're too old? That you're not educated enough? That people like you don't succeed in certain fields? Those are just stories. And stories can be rewritten. Ha moves to a new position. Second, you have to stop outsourcing your validation. This is huge. For so much of my early career, my mood, my confidence, My sense of self-worth depended entirely on external validation. If a film did well, I was on top of the world. If critics praised me, I felt worthy. If audiences loved me, I felt valuable. But if a project flopped, I was devastated. If someone criticized me, I questioned everything about myself. If people didn't respond the way I hoped, I felt like a failure. Do you see how exhausting that is? Do you see how that puts your entire emotional well-being at the mercy of other people's opinions and circumstances you cannot control? I had to learn to generate my own validation. I had to learn to celebrate my own growth. I had to learn to acknowledge my own efforts, regardless of the outcome. I started keeping a journal where I would write down 3 things I was proud of myself for every single day. Not 3 things that went well, 3 things I was proud of myself for. The effort I put in, the kindness I showed, the risk I took, the fear I faced. Slowly, I started building an internal reference point for my worth, wasn't dependent on external circumstances. And here's what's beautiful about that. When you stop needing validation from others, you start receiving more of it. When you stop chasing approval, approval starts finding you. When you stop trying to prove your worth becomes undeniable. Her pauses for emphasis. Third, you have to develop a practice of self-compassion. And I don't mean being soft on yourself. I mean treating yourself the way you would treat someone you love who is going through what you're going through. I used to be so mean to myself. The things I would say to myself in my head, I would never say to my worst enemy. I would call myself stupid for making mistakes. I would call myself ugly when I didn't like how I looked in photos. I would call myself a failure when things didn't go according to plan. And then one day, I realized if I had a daughter and she made the same mistakes I made, would I call her stupid? If she was struggling with confidence about her appearance, would I call her ugly? If she was working hard toward a goal and faced setbacks, would I call her a failure? Of course not. I would comfort her. I would remind her of her strengths. I would encourage her to keep going. So why wasn't I extending that same compassion to myself? I started talking to myself the way I would talk to someone I loved. With patience, with encouragement, with understanding. And that changed everything. Because when you're not constantly fighting against yourself, you have so much more energy to fight for your dreams. High walks to another area of the stage of fourth. You have to invest in yourself like your life depends on it. Because it does. I don't just mean financially, though investing in your education, your skills, your health, your growth is crucial. I mean, investing your time, your attention, your energy in becoming the person you want to be. Every single day, I do something that makes me better than I was the day before. I read, I take classes, I work with coaches and mentors, I practice new skills, I have difficult conversations, I push myself out of my comfort zone, not because I'm broken and need to be fixed, but because growth is the rent I pay for living, because stagnation is the enemy of happiness. Because the best investment I can make is in my own development. And here's what's incredible. The more you invest in yourself, the more valuable you become, not just to yourself, but to everyone whose life you touch. When I invested in learning about production, I became more valuable to film studios. When I invested in learning about business, I became more valuable to brands who wanted to partner with me. When I invested in understanding global markets, I became more valuable to international projects. But more than that, when I invested in understanding myself, healing my wounds, building my confidence, and clarifying my values, I became more valuable as a friend, as a partner, as a daughter, as a role model. Her returns towards center stage, and finally, you have to understand that fixing yourself first is not a destination, it's a practice. It's not something you do once and then you're done. It's something you commit to doing every single day for the rest of your life. I still work with therapists. I still read self-development books. I still have days when the old doubts creep in and I have to remind myself of my worth. I still make mistakes and have to practice self-compassion. I still have to choose courage over comfort. The difference is that now I have the tools, the awareness, and the commitment to do the work. I don't wait for external circumstances to make me feel worthy. I don't postpone my happiness until some future achievement. I don't put my dreams on hold until I feel ready enough. Because here's what I've learned: you will never feel ready enough. You will never feel perfect enough. You will never feel like you have all the answers. But you can feel worthy enough. You can feel brave enough. You can feel committed enough to take the next step. Addresses the audience more intimately, and that brings me to what I want to leave you with today. Right now, as you're sitting there listening to me, there's something in your life that you know needs to change. There's some area where you've been waiting for external permission, external validation, external circumstances to align before you take action. There's some dream you've been putting on hold, some relationship you need to heal, some habit you need to break, some fear you need to face, some conversation you need to have, some risk you need to take. You know what it is. It's that thing that came to mind just now when I said those words. And I'm here to tell you that the time is now. Not when you feel more confident now. Not when you have more resources now. Not when the timing is perfect now. Because the timing will never be perfect. The resources will never feel sufficient. The confidence will never feel complete. But your life is happening now. Your dreams are waiting now. Your potential is calling now. I walks closer to the audience, the little girl in me who was scared to eat her Indian lunch in the school cafeteria needed someone to tell her that her differences were her strengths. The 17-year-old girl who was shaking backstage at Miss World needed someone to tell her that she was already enough. The young actress facing rejection after rejection needed someone to tell her that every no was leading her closer to her was. The woman moving to a new country with big dreams needed someone to tell her that she had everything she needed within herself to succeed. I'm telling you what I needed to hear then, what I still need to hear sometimes now. You are enough. Right now, as you are enough. You don't need to be perfect to get started. You don't need to have all the answers to take the first step. You don't need to see the whole staircase to climb the first step. You just need to fix your relationship with yourself first. You need to believe that you matter, that your dreams matter, that your voice matters, that your story matters. Because it does. Because you do. Ha pauses, looks across the entire audience. And when you fix yourself first, when you heal your wounds, when you build your confidence, when you clarify your values, when you trust your intuition, when you take ownership of your life, you don't just transform yourself. You give permission to everyone around you to do the same. You become the proof that it's possible. You become the example that inspires others. You become the change you want to see in the world. Your grandmother was right when she told you to love yourself first. Your mother was right when she told you to believe in yourself. Your inner wisdom is right when it tells you that you're capable of more than you're currently settling for. But loving yourself, believing in yourself, honoring your potential, these are not feelings you wait to have. These are choices you make. These are actions you take. These are practices you commit to. Moves back towards center stage for the final moments. So I'm going to ask you to do something right now. I'm going to ask you to make a commitment to yourself. Not to me, not to anyone else in this room, but to yourself. Commit to fixing yourself first. Commit to doing the work. Commit to treating yourself with the love and respect you deserve. Commit to pursuing your dreams with the same intensity you've been using to doubt yourself. Commit to becoming the person you know you're capable of being. Not perfect, that's not the goal. Authentic. Not fearless courage is not the absence of fear. It's action in spite of fear. Committed. Committed to your growth. Committed to your healing. Committed to your purpose. Because the world needs what you have to offer. The world needs your unique gifts, your specific perspective, your individual talents. But you have to fix your relationship with yourself first before you can share those gifts fully. You have to fall in love with yourself first before you can love others completely. You have to believe in yourself first before others can believe in you. You have to fix yourself first. Her final pause. Final look across the audience. And when you do, when you really do the work of fixing yourself first, you'll discover something beautiful. You weren't broken to begin with. You were just disconnected from your own power. You were just telling yourself the wrong stories. You were just looking for validation in the wrong places. You were just waiting for permission that was always yours to give. Fix yourself first, not because you're broken, but because you're worthy of the effort. Not because you have to, but because you get to. Fix yourself first, and then go fix the world. One authentic step at a time, one brave choice at a time, one act of self-love at a time. The stage is yours. The spotlight is on. The world is waiting. What are you going to do with this one precious life? Steps back, smiles, extends arms wide. The choice, as always, is yours. Thank you.